We planned this trip as part of a Coffee with Sem. It's a pilot trip to see how freshmen would react to travel in their first year. It was directly associated with a course in which they had a collective engagement with each other on a topic that was rather meaningful. So our course was called Making Coffee, and throughout the course we gave a history of coffee. We talked about the social implications of growing coffee, what the life of the growers were like. Throughout the course we attended things like coffee conferences, had a coffee house project, and we wanted to see that if you took the next step, you took the students to the situation in which coffee is grown and they get to see the daily lives of the growers, how that would affect them throughout their college experience.
And I just thought that it wasn't going to be a class that I would take much from. Like, it was going to be one of those classes you just, like an icebreaker class for freshman students. But taking the class, you started to learn about something I had no idea that was going on. I had no idea there was any issues with coffee, that there was anything going on in the coffee industry that was affecting people's lives.
The trip was organized in order to provide a variety of different coffee experiences. So we started with just immersion into Guatemala City, some meetings with representatives here to provide some background, and then the idea was to visit at least one cooperative, at least one direct trade coffee relationship, and at least one either fair trade or colonial system for coffee production.
I think one of the most profound changes that I saw in the students throughout the trip is we started off in Guatemala City, which was a very intense urban experience. And each time, to each project we went to, the students got deeper and deeper into what it meant for the Guatemalans to live the kind of lives they live and how that's associated with practices like making coffee. So one of the first things we did outside of the city is we went to a small farmer whose name is Julio, and Julio supplies coffee for Un Mundo Cafe in Springfield, Ohio. So our students have gone to Mundo Cafe, they drank his coffee was part of our coffee house project, and then from there they actually got to go to his house, and Julio invited us into his house, took us into his space, showed us his hand-cranked depulper, talked about the process he's going through as a struggling farmer in an industry where he can't be certified as fair trade.
I really enjoyed meeting him. I thought it was really special how he just invited us into his home. I mean, he knew us because we bought his coffee and stuff, but that's really kind of special. I mean, he's working very hard to establish a name for himself, and I wish him the best.
We went from there to a place called the Ruth Naomi Project, which is a widows project in which the widows were left after husbands were assassinated or killed or kidnapped during the Civil War, and talk to them about their lives and how they're trying to regroup and have an economically sustainable way of living.
This whole women's project came together after suffering, tragedies in their lives. They just bring their families together and thrive on the basic materials that they have and make a life out of it. It's amazing. All the little kids are, of course, the cutest, wanting to see all of our bracelets and all of our rings and the cameras and the pictures. They're so fascinated with that. And even with the language barrier, you still definitely feel that connection with people. Even though you can't have a conversation with them, feel like, you still are receptive to what we're both feeling and what we're both thinking.
Outside of the city, we went to Chichicastenango and Quetzaltenango, both cities in the Highlands. One, which has a distinctly Mayan character to it, has one of the largest Mayan markets in the area.
When we were in Chichi Castananga, which is really hard to say, but we all learned how to, we got to go to one of the biggest Mayan markets in the world, and it was quite an experience because it seemed like it took up the entire town and just went all through the streets. They sold all the Mayan goods you can think of, Mayan clothing, the Mayan dress, and a lot of the jewelry and stuff. Like, it was just all like gorgeous colors, and these people like made it themselves. It was a really great experience, and I was really pleased that we got to see that because I feel like that's one of the things you read about in travel books.
Well, we're going into the fields at Carlos Sainz's Finca Las Brisas. We met Carlos Sainz at a coffee conference in Miami that we took all the students to. Some of the students heard him talk about him trying to bring high quality coffee to Guatemala citizens. And this is his finca that's been his family for hundreds of years. So we're hoping to get out of this a connection between going to our conference in Miami, the things we talked about after the conference, the course, and the way in which an individual farmer who's in some sort of transitional system between a cooperative system and a mainstream system is able to function within the Guatemala coffee trade.
The second place that we visited was Santa Anita, which is a coffee cooperative that is run entirely by ex-guerrillas from the Civil War, which really suggests a different model, a socialist commune setup that was one of the more unusual ones that we were able to see.
I think for the students that was a really profound place to be, between that and the Miami project and talking to Julio, to really think about not only is there a human face to coffee, but also that these individuals are making choices immediately that aren't necessarily to the benefit, but are to their long-term benefits. And I think for the students, it was a really unique experience to see that kind of intentionality put into every aspect of one's living.
The last part of the trip reflects something that's important to Guatemala's future, which is tourism. So we went to Panajachel, which is a large tourist enclave on a lake in the Atitlan region. We also went to Los Torales, which is a coffee plantation that has deliberately tried to develop ecotourism opportunities as a way of supplementing the income of the plantation. The final part of the trip is Tikal, which is the former capital of the Mayan kingdom.
Right now we are in Tikal and we are visiting Mayan ruins, and as you can see we are all hiking up these pretty awesome ruins that date back to like 750 AD. So it's pretty awesome. We actually get to climb on them and actually see what was built by the Mayans.
These are partly just to have some fun, to see another side to Guatemala, but also to put into perspective what it means to try to develop a tourism industry in a place where more than 80% of the population lives in poverty. And so it provides a different window into Guatemalan history, but also the future of where Guatemala is trying to head.
You think of an issue like coffee and say, okay, how are we going to think about it? Well, we're going to think about it philosophically, and more narrowly, we're going to think about it ethically, and we're also going to think about it historically. Well, that begins to give students a sense of how to think holistically about a particular problem. That's laying the first foundation, which is a kind of liberal education foundation, and then the other things mount from there. If we demonstrate in that first term, so we set the stage for that kind of education, then it's likely that students will begin to understand that their education is not only their responsibility, but requires them to think imaginatively, creatively, and in interdisciplinary manners, which is the focus of the WITSEMs.